You can give someone a piece of your body and still mean nothing to them. I learned that from a woman named Sarah. She sat across from me 17 years ago in my office, her hands folded so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. She wasn't crying. That's what I remember most. She looked like someone who had cried so much that her body had simply run out of the capacity for it. And when she finally spoke, her voice was flat, almost attached, like she was reading someone else's story from a script she'd been forced to memorize. "I gave him my kidney," she said, "and a month later, he left me for someone else." I've heard thousands of confessions in my career. I've sat with people who've done terrible things and people who've had terrible things done to them. But there was something about Sarah's story that stayed with me long after she stopped coming to see me. Maybe it was the way she kept apologizing, not to him, but to herself. Or maybe it was because her story wasn't really about a kidney at all. It was about something far more universal, far more painful. It was about what happens when love becomes sacrifice. And sacrifice becomes a trap you didn't even know you were building. So let me tell you her story, not because it's dramatic, though it is, but because buried inside it is a truth that too many of us learn too late. And if you've ever loved someone more than they loved you, if you've ever given until you were empty and still been left behind, then maybe you'll see yourself in Sarah's words. Maybe you'll understand what I came to understand, that the most dangerous gift you can give another person is a part of yourself you'll never get back. Before I go any further, tell me, where are you watching from right now? I'd love to know. Drop your city or country in the comments. And if this story sounds familiar to you, if you've been where Sarah was, I want to hear from you too. Because stories like this, they're never really about one person. They're about all of us. Sarah met Daniel in graduate school. She was studying literature. He was in pre-med. They met at a campus coffee shop during finals week, both exhausted, both surviving on caffeine and hope. She told me she liked him immediately, not because he was charming or particularly handsome, but because he seemed fragile in a way that made her want to protect him. He had this nervous energy, she said. He talked fast, laughed too loud, and avoided eye contact when he was anxious. She found it endearing. They started dating 3 weeks later, and for the first year it was good. Not perfect. Sarah was careful to emphasize that, but good. He was attentive when he wasn't distracted. He remembered small things, like how she took her tea, or which author she was obsessing over that month. They had inside jokes. They had routines. They had a future they talked about in hypotheticals that felt closer to promises. But there was always something underneath, a tension Sarah couldn't name. Daniel had this habit of pulling away whenever things got too close, too real. If she said, "I love you" first, he'd say it back, but only after a pause that lasted just a beat too long. If she talked about moving in together, he'd agree, but then change the subject. She told herself it was just his personality. He was cautious. He'd been hurt before. He needed time. And then, 2 years into their relationship, Daniel got sick. It started with fatigue. He'd come home from his hospital rotations, he was doing his residency by then, and collapse on the couch, too tired to even eat. Then came the nausea, the swelling in his legs, the strange metallic taste in his mouth that wouldn't go away. Sarah pushed him to see a doctor. He resisted at first, the way young men often do when their bodies betray them. But eventually he went. The diagnosis came back fast and brutal. Chronic kidney disease, stage 4. His kidneys were failing. The doctors couldn't say exactly why. Maybe it was genetic, maybe it was something environmental. Maybe it was just bad luck. But the prognosis was clear. Without a transplant, Daniel would be on dialysis for the rest of his life. And even with dialysis, his life expectancy would be cut short. Sarah told me she felt the ground disappear beneath her when she heard the news. Not because she didn't know what to do, but because she knew exactly what she was going to do before the doctor even finished explaining the options. She was going to give him her kidney. It wasn't a decision she had to think about. It was a fact, a certain. The kind of love that doesn't ask questions because the answer is already written into your bones. Daniel didn't ask her to do it. That's important. He didn't beg or manipulate or guilt her into it. In fact, when she first brought it up, he resisted. He said it was too much, too dangerous, too permanent. But Sarah insisted. She got tested. She was a match. And once she knew that, there was no turning back. How could she live with herself? She thought, knowing she had the power to save him and chose not to. The surgery was scheduled for March. Sarah spent weeks preparing, physically, emotionally, logistically. She told her family. She took leave from work. She read everything she could about living donation, about recovery, about what it would mean to move through the world with one kidney instead of two. And through it all, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. Clarity. She was doing something that mattered. She was proving, once and for all, that her love was real. But here's what Sarah didn't know then, what she couldn't have known. The mind has a way of turning sacrifice into currency. When you give something that costs you deeply, some part of you starts to believe that the other person owes you something in return. Not because you're selfish, but because the sacrifice creates an imbalance. And the human brain hates imbalance. It wants equilibrium. It wants fairness. It wants the scales to even out. Sarah went into that operating room believing she was giving a gift. But what she didn't realize was that she was also writing a contract, one that only she had signed. Have you ever done something for someone you loved and then, later, felt resentful when they didn't appreciate it the way you thought they should? Tell me in the comments, because that feeling, that quiet, creeping bitterness, it's more common than we admit. And it's exactly where Sarah's story starts to turn. The surgery itself went well. Both of them recovered without complications. Sarah spent a week in the hospital, then another few weeks at home, moving slowly, learning how to live in a body that felt different, lighter, somehow incomplete. Daniel recovered faster. Recipients usually do. And within a month he was back at work, back to his routines, back to the life that kidney disease had almost stolen from him. Sarah told me she expected gratitude. Not constant, performative thank yous, but something. Some acknowledgement of what she'd done. Some shift in the way he treated her, the way he saw her. She had given him a part of her body. Surely that meant something. But Daniel didn't change. If anything, he became more distant. He was busy with work, he said. He was trying to catch up on everything he'd missed while he was sick. He needed space to process what had happened. Sarah tried to be understanding. She tried to give him room, but the space between them kept growing. And no matter how much she reached for him, he stayed just out of reach. 6 weeks after the surgery, Daniel told her he needed to talk. They were sitting in his apartment. Her apartment now felt too small, too full of her own recovery. And he looked at her the way people look at you when they're about to say something that will hurt. Not cruel, but careful, like he was defusing a bomb. "I don't think this is working," he said. Sarah told me she didn't understand at first. She thought he was talking about work or stress or something logistical. But then he clarified. He meant them. Their relationship. He said he'd been feeling it for a while. The sense that they weren't right for each other, that they wanted different things, that maybe they'd stayed together longer than they should have out of comfort or fear or habit. And now that he was healthy again, now that he could think clearly, he realized he needed to be honest. He needed to leave. Sarah asked him if it was because of the kidney, if the surgery had made him feel obligated, trapped, guilty. He said no. He said the kidney had nothing to do with it. He said he cared about her, that he always would. But that caring wasn't enough. He needed more. He needed something she couldn't give him. And then this is the part Sarah could barely say out loud. He told her there was someone else, a nurse he'd been working with during his recovery. They'd gotten close. They hadn't done anything physical yet, he promised. But there were feelings there, real ones, the kind he hadn't felt with Sarah in a long time. She left his apartment that night and didn't remember driving home. She said it felt like her body had separated from her mind, like she was watching herself from a distance, moving through motions she didn't understand. And when she finally got home, she sat on the floor of her bathroom and stared at the scar on her abdomen, the thin, jagged line where they'd taken out her kidney. And she thought, I gave you a part of me, and you're giving me nothing. That's when the anger came. Not all at once, but in waves. Anger at Daniel, yes, but also at herself, for being so naive, for believing that love could be measured in organs, for thinking that sacrifice would make him see her the way she wanted to be seen. She came to see me a week later, and over the months that followed, we started to untangle what had really happened. Because the truth is, Sarah's story isn't really about betrayal. It's about something deeper and more uncomfortable. It's about the difference between giving and investing. When you give a gift, you release it. You let it go. You don't expect anything in return because the giving itself is the point. But when you invest, you're buying something. You're putting something in with the expectation that you'll get something back. And Sarah, without realizing it, had invested her kidney. She'd invested her love, her body, her future. And when the return didn't come, she felt robbed. But here's the hard truth, the one Sarah had to learn slowly and painfully. Daniel didn't owe her anything. Not his love, not his loyalty, not his future. The kidney was a gift, or it was supposed to be. But the moment it became a reason he should stay, it stopped being a gift and became a chain. And no one stays in a relationship because they feel chained. Psychologically, this is what's called transactional love. It's when love stops being about connection and starts being about exchange. I do this for you, so you do that for me. I sacrifice here, so you sacrifice there. And the moment the exchange feels unequal, resentment creeps in. It poisons everything. Sarah spent months wrestling with this. She wanted to hate Daniel. She wanted to believe he was a monster, that he'd used her, that he'd manipulated her into giving up her kidney and then discarded her like trash. And maybe part of that was true. Maybe Daniel was selfish. Maybe he was a coward. But that wasn't the whole story. The whole story was that Sarah had given something she couldn't afford to lose, not physically but emotionally, and then expected it to change everything. And when it didn't, she broke. Have you ever given more than someone was asking for, and then felt angry when they didn't appreciate it? I think most of us have. It's one of the most human things we do, and it's one of the most painful. It took Sarah almost 2 years to find peace with what happened, not closure. She was careful to tell me she never got closure, and she didn't believe in it anymore, but peace, a kind of quiet acceptance that what happened had happened, and she couldn't undo it, and maybe she didn't need to. She told me that the turning point came on a random Tuesday afternoon. She was walking through a park near her apartment, and she saw a mother pushing a stroller. The baby was crying, and the mother looked exhausted, but she kept going, kept soothing, kept moving forward. And Sarah thought, that's what love is. It's not about getting something back. It's about giving because you can, because you choose to, not because you're owed. And in that moment, she realized she'd been carrying the kidney like a weapon, like proof of her goodness, her worthiness, her right to be loved. But organs aren't arguments. Sacrifice isn't leverage. And love, real love, doesn't keep score. Sarah stopped trying to make sense of why Daniel left. She stopped trying to figure out what she did wrong or what she could have done differently. She accepted that some people leave, even when you give them everything. And that's not a reflection of your worth. It's just a painful truth of being human. We can't control how other people love us. We can only control how we love ourselves. She also started to rebuild her relationship with her own body. For months after the surgery, she'd felt betrayed by it, by the scar, by the absence, by the reminder that she'd given something she couldn't take back. But slowly, she learned to see the scar differently, not as a mark of loss, but as proof of her capacity to love. She'd done something extraordinary. She'd saved a life. And the fact that it didn't save the relationship didn't make it less valuable. I asked her once if she regretted it, the donation, the surgery, the whole thing. She thought about it for a long time before she answered. No, she said, I don't regret it, but I wish I'd gone in with different expectations. I wish I'd known that giving someone a part of yourself doesn't mean they'll give you a part of themselves back. I wish I'd known that love isn't math. That's the lesson Sarah taught me, and it's the one I want to leave you with today. Love isn't math. You can't add up all the things you've done for someone and expect them to equal the things they do for you. You can't subtract pain and multiply effort and end up with a balanced equation. Love is messier than that. It's unfair. It's uneven. And the people who love the deepest often get hurt the most. But that doesn't mean you stop giving. It just means you have to learn to give without expectations. You have to learn to love without keeping score. And you have to learn to walk away when the person you're giving to can't or won't give back. Not because they're bad, but because they're not yours. Sarah moved on. She met someone else a few years later, a man who didn't need her to save him, who loved her without owing her, who saw her scar and thought it was beautiful not because of what it represented, but because it was part of her. They're married now, She sent me a photo once. She looked happy. Not perfect, not healed, but happy. And Daniel? She told me she heard through mutual friends that he and the nurse didn't last. That he's still single, still working, still searching for something he can't name. She doesn't hate him anymore. She doesn't wish him harm. She just wishes he'd been honest sooner. Honest enough to say he didn't love her the way she loved him. Honest enough to let her go before she gave him something she couldn't take back. So here's what I want you to take from Sarah's story. If you're in a relationship where you're giving more than you're getting, ask yourself, am I giving because I want to? Or because I'm hoping it will make them love me more? If it's the latter, stop. Stop giving. Stop sacrificing. Stop trying to earn love that should be freely given. Because you can give someone your kidney, your heart, your entire life, and they can still walk away. And when they do, the only thing that will sustain you is the knowledge that you gave because you chose to, not because you needed something in return. Love isn't a transaction. It's a gift. And the moment it stops feeling like a gift, it's time to let it go. Tell me in the comments. Have you ever sacrificed something for someone who didn't appreciate it? How did you move forward? I read every single comment, and I'd love to hear your story. And if this resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because somewhere out there, there's a Sarah sitting alone, wondering if she's the problem. And she's not. She's just human, just like the rest of us.